Where does suffering come from within you? Have you ever wondered why there are days when everything in your life seems normal, nothing major happens, nothing truly bad occurs, but you still feel heavy inside? You still go to work, you still talk to people, you still complete your tasks, you still smile at the right moments, everything outside looks fine. But when you finally pause for a moment, when you are no longer busy, no longer running after anything, you begin to notice something strange inside you. Not quite sadness, not exactly pain, just a quiet heaviness, a subtle tiredness, as if you are living, but not really touching life itself. And what is more interesting is that this feeling is not new. It is not something that appeared yesterday or today. It has been there for a long time, quiet, steady, like a thin background layer beneath everything you do. But because it is not intense, not sharp, you get used to it. So used to it that you stop questioning it. So used to it that you assume everyone feels the same. And life goes on, without you ever truly stopping to ask where this feeling comes from. You may have once thought that suffering only exists when something big happens, loss, failure, heartbreak, or obvious pain. But if you look closely at your own life, you will notice something different. There are many moments when nothing bad is happening, yet you still do not feel light. There are mornings when you wake up and everything is still intact, but you do not want to start the day. There are moments when you are surrounded by people, laughter, and connection, yet something inside you remains still, as if you do not fully belong there. And still, you continue. You are used to continuing. You are used to not stopping long enough to truly feel how you are. In modern life, we are trained to solve problems. If there is pressure, reduce it. If there is difficulty, overcome it. If there is a goal, achieve it. Everything points outward, toward fixing, improving, progressing. But very rarely are we taught to sit still and look inward, to notice this quiet background feeling that has been there all along. You work, you try, you take responsibility, and as soon as one task is finished, another appears. When one goal is reached, another replaces it. When one problem is solved, a new one arises. Life never truly stops, and that is normal. But something more subtle is happening inside you. Your mind never stops either. It keeps thinking, comparing, running forward, even when your body is resting. And slowly, you begin to live in a familiar state, always on the way. On the way to something better. On the way to a better version of yourself. On the way to a more stable, peaceful, complete feeling. But strangely, the more you move toward it, the less you actually feel enough. Every time you reach something, that sense of enough fades quickly, and a new sense of lack quietly appears. You may not notice it, but many times during the day you are living in a state of not enough. Not good enough, not successful enough, not secure enough, not recognized enough, not safe enough. And this, not enough, does not always appear as words in your mind. It shows up in subtle tension, in urgency, in dissatisfaction with the present, even when nothing is wrong. The important thing is, you do not recognize it as suffering. Because it feels too normal, too familiar. It does not look like what you thought suffering should look like. It has no loud sound, no clear collapse, no obvious wound. But it makes you tired, slowly, continuously, in a way you cannot easily name. And perhaps what prevents you from seeing this suffering is that you are too busy trying to end suffering. You keep looking outward for something to change how you feel inside. A better job, a better relationship, a better situation, a better version of yourself. But in that process, you rarely look back at how you are actually relating to life itself. How you are holding things. How you are resisting things. How you are constantly expecting things to go your way. There is a very quiet cycle running in your life. Desire, achievement, then desire again. Hope, disappointment, then hope again. Effort, temporary satisfaction, then lack again. It is not loud, so you do not see it as a problem, but it is the background of your daily tiredness. You do not recognize suffering not because you are unaware, but because it is too close to your normal way of living. It is woven into your thoughts, your reactions, your expectations, your habits. It does not stand apart so that you can observe it, It is already inside the way you operate. But if you ever pause long enough, not to react, not to fix, not to immediately change what is happening inside, you may begin to notice something subtle. There is a quiet tension in always wanting things to match your expectations. There is a quiet grasping in not wanting things to be different from what you prefer. And there is a quiet urgency in wanting everything to be okay immediately. Suffering is not always about what happens to you. It is often about how you stand in front of what happens. A single sentence can become a story. A delay can become anxiety. A glance can become interpretation. And it is that extra layer, the layer you do not notice, that is where suffering begins to form. Life is not pressing down on you. Your mind is adding weight to it. And when you begin to see this, even slightly, you will no longer look at suffering the same way. You will stop thinking of it only as big events or obvious pain. You will begin to see it in small, ordinary, familiar moments. And in that seeing, something new becomes possible. The ability to pause, even for a moment, and stop making things heavier than they already are. When you begin to look more deeply into suffering in your life, you may notice something strange. Suffering is not always something that happens to you from the outside. Very often, it is something being created in the way your mind operates from moment to moment. No one is placing it on you. Life is not intentionally making you heavy, but the way you receive, hold, and react to experience quietly makes everything heavier. In simple terms, life is always changing. Nothing outside stays still. People come and go. Work changes. Emotions change. Circumstances change. But inside, there is a very natural tendency to hold on to what feels pleasant, to push away what feels unpleasant, and to want things to go the way you expect. This tendency is not wrong. It is human. It is natural. But if it is not seen clearly, you end up living in a constant attempt to adjust the world so that you can feel okay. And this is where suffering quietly begins. Try to observe a normal day in your life. When something happens that you do not like, a delay, a comment, an unexpected outcome, what happens inside you? Usually, it is not just the event itself. Almost immediately, there is a mental reaction. It shouldn't be like this. And that single thought creates tension. The event is small, but the comparison in your mind is large. You compare what is happening with what you think should have happened. And when they do not match, resistance arises. And even a small resistance is already a form of suffering. A simple image helps here. Imagine holding a handful of sand. The more tightly you squeeze, the more sand slips away. But you keep squeezing, because you are afraid of losing it. In the end, it is not the sand that exhausts you. It is the tension in your hand. Life is like sand, always shifting, always moving. But your effort to hold it still is what creates strain. From a deeper perspective, suffering arises when the mind clings to the idea that things must be this way for me to be okay. The moment that happens, you place your peace into something unstable. And because it is unstable, your mind cannot be at rest. You may have a good job, but if you are afraid of losing it all the time, it becomes a source of anxiety. You may have a relationship, but if you constantly fear it changing, it becomes something to protect rather than something to rest in. You may have enough in life, but if your mind keeps saying, not enough, then enough never truly arrives. Suffering is not about what you have or do not have. It is about how you are holding on to it. And when you begin to see this clearly, even for a moment, something very quiet changes. Not everything outside changes, but your reaction does. And in that shift, life begins to feel a little lighter than before. If you have stayed with this until here, perhaps something inside you has already begun to quiet down a little. Not because all answers have become clear, but because you are starting to look at yourself in a different way. No longer rushing to judge right or wrong. No longer rushing to fix anything. But simply observing, seeing what is actually happening within you. You can try to pause for a moment right now. Nothing else needs to be done. Just look back at a very ordinary day of yours, from morning to night, and gently ask yourself, how many times during that day did you feel slightly uncomfortable? It does not have to be deep suffering, Just small moments, a slight irritation when someone says something you don't like, a bit of tension when work does not go smoothly, a bit of worry about the future, a small sense of lack when you look at yourself. Have you noticed, these feelings arise very quickly, but they do not leave as quickly. Sometimes, something small that happened in the morning is still present in your mind by afternoon, or even evening. The event may no longer be clear, but its residue is still there. And sometimes, you don't even remember the event clearly anymore, but the feeling it left behind is still intact. Try to notice something else. When a difficult emotion arises, what do you usually do with it? Do you truly pause and feel it? Or do you immediately do something to escape it? Maybe you open your phone. Maybe you talk to someone. Maybe you throw yourself into another task, or simply continue thinking, analyzing, explaining. But have you noticed, the more you try to escape it, the more deeply you sometimes fall into it. There are emotions that are not strong enough to knock you down, but subtle enough that you don't want to look at them directly. And precisely because you do not look directly, you end up carrying them for much longer. Have you ever asked yourself, does this emotion truly need to be solved? Or does it simply need to be seen? Perhaps you have never tried just staying with it for a moment. Not pushing it away, not fixing it, not analyzing it, just noticing, oh, I am feeling uncomfortable right now, and standing still with it, like standing quietly in a light rain. What happens then? At first, it may not feel easy. Your mind will want to run away, to do something, to escape. But if you stay a little longer, you may notice something strange. The emotion is not as fixed as you thought. It moves, it shifts, it is not a solid block. It is more like a wave. It comes, it stays, and then it goes. But what is important is that you usually jump into that wave and assume that you are it. When anger arises, you say, I am angry. When anxiety arises, you say, I am an anxious person. When sadness arises, you think, I am this sadness. But if you look more closely, you may notice there is a part of you that is aware of these emotions. A part that is not fully carried away. A very small, very quiet presence that simply observes. And that part is something very important that you often overlook. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the one who is aware of them arising. Just recognizing this creates a small space, not a cold distance, but enough space so you are no longer completely absorbed. You can gently ask yourself in a normal moment, what is present in me right now? No need for a correct answer. Just observe. Maybe there is tension, maybe worry, maybe fatigue, or simply emptiness. Then ask another gentle question. Will this stay here forever? You do not need logic to answer. Just observe. You will see it does not stay fixed. It changes. It moves. It is not something permanent as you once believed. And when you see this impermanence, you begin to loosen your grip. There is something very deep you may realize for yourself. Most suffering does not come from emotions themselves, but from your urge to immediately hold onto them or push them away. You want happiness to last. You want sadness to disappear instantly. You want anxiety to never arise. And this rejection of natural flow is what creates inner tension. It is like standing in a river and trying to hold the water still. But water does not stay still. And so, you become tired. Sometimes, you don't need to do anything with emotions at all. You just need to give them space to exist. No story added, no meaning added, no turning them into a problem. Just, oh, it is here. And then let it pass in its own way. You can also look deeper at something else. Much of your stress does not come from the present moment, but from carrying both the past and the future in your mind at the same time. Your body is here, but your mind is in a meeting that already ended, or a conversation that has not yet happened. And in that gap, the present becomes heavier than it truly is. Imagine that for a few minutes. You only stay with this very moment. No past pulled in, no future pulled in, no additional thoughts. What do you see? Perhaps a small sense of silence. Very simple, but very real. And perhaps you will realize something important. You do not need to fix your entire life in order to suffer less. You only need to learn how to stay with this moment without making it heavier. No extra stories, no judgment, no resistance. Just seeing, just knowing, just being present. And in that simple presence, you may begin to see something you have missed for so long. Suffering does not only come from what happens, but from how you fail to stay long enough with what is happening to see it as it truly is. When you begin to see more clearly how your mind operates, you may realize something very real. Understanding alone is not enough. Intellectual understanding helps you see the problem, but it does not make it disappear. What truly changes things is when you begin to be present with your own experience, right as it is happening, not to control it, but to no longer be carried away as before. And this does not need to be complicated. It does not require you to change your entire life. It begins with very small, ordinary moments in your day, moments you usually overlook. The first practice is to pause when you notice yourself being carried away. You do not need to wait until things become overwhelming. The moment you feel yourself becoming rushed, worried, or irritated, simply pause for a moment. Do nothing, fix nothing, just stop. Then return to your breath, very gently. No need to adjust it. No need to breathe deeper or slower. Just notice. I am breathing in. I am breathing out. The key is not technique, but the fact that you are stepping out of thought for a moment and returning to direct experience. You will see that even this small step creates a different inner space. Less tight, less crowded. Thoughts may still appear, but you are no longer standing inside them. You are observing from outside. The second practice is to gently name your emotions, without analysis. When discomfort arises, you do not need the story behind it. Just quietly recognize, I am feeling anxious, or I am irritated, or I am tense. It sounds simple, but it has a deep effect. When you can name an emotion, you are no longer completely absorbed by it. It is still there, but it is no longer all of you. It is just a state arising within you. Before, when anger arose, you became the anger. When worry arose, you became the worry. But when you can see and name it, a small separation appears, not to distance yourself, but to avoid total identification. And even this small space is enough to reduce its control over you. The third practice is to gently release small reactions the moment they arise. In daily life, reactions come very quickly. A word you dislike, a situation that does not go as planned, a small delay, and immediately the mind wants to react. But you can try something different. Before reacting, pause for a very brief moment, not to suppress, but to see more clearly. What reaction is about to happen here? Just seeing this gives you a choice. You may still react, but that reaction is no longer unconscious. It carries a bit more awareness, and that awareness changes everything. You will begin to notice that much of your exhaustion does not come from events themselves, but from your continuous reaction to them. Each reaction adds another layer of tension, and these layers accumulate until you no longer know why you feel so tired. Another gentle practice is to return to what is present in the moment. Not to deny goals or desires, but to avoid losing yourself in constant future orientation. During the day, you can pause a few times and simply notice where you are, what you are doing, how your body feels. No judgment, just awareness. When eating, just eat. When walking, just walk. When sitting, just sit and feel your presence. It sounds simple, but this simplicity is often overlooked by the mind, which always wants to go elsewhere, do something else, become something else. But when you truly return to what is, there is a subtle lightness. Not because life changes, but because you stop making it heavier. And the most important thing in all these practices is not how often you succeed, but how often you return. When you forget, you will forget. You will be carried away. You will react as before. That is natural. But each time you notice and return, even for a second, you are creating a new direction for your mind. Not a perfect direction, but a clearer one. And gradually, you will see something very clear. Life outside may remain the same. There is still pressure, still problems, still things you do not like, but the way you live within it has changed. You no longer react too quickly, no longer hold on too long, no longer get carried too far. There are very ordinary moments, yet you feel a little lighter, not because the world has changed, but because you are no longer adding so much to it as before. And perhaps these small moments are where you begin to realize something very real. Peace is not found in everything being the way you want it to be. but in no longer being pulled away from yourself whenever things are not. There are times when you don't even realize you are suffering, not because life is too heavy, but because you have already become used to that heaviness. It is no longer something unusual. It has become your normal state throughout the day. You wake up with it. You work with it. You go to sleep with it. Quietly, not loud, but always there. You are still living, still doing everything like everyone else. But if there is a moment when you truly stop for a while, you may notice something unsettled inside. Not clearly sadness, not clearly pain, just a subtle sense of lack. A quiet tension, like a string that is always slightly pulled but never fully released. And strangely, you have learned to call that normal. There are days when you are not tired because of work, but because your mind never stops, thinking about what is not finished, what still needs to be done. A sentence from yesterday keeps repeating. A worry about tomorrow that has not even happened yet. There is no space left just to sit and be. And when you cannot sit with yourself, you start to believe you need to keep doing something in order to be okay. You open your phone. You look for something to watch. You do another small task, not because you truly need it, but because if you stop, you will hear the noise inside more clearly. But what you are avoiding does not disappear. It simply waits for you to slow down. There is something very hard to see. Most of the heaviness you feel does not come from events themselves, but from how you hold those events in your mind. A difficult sentence, if it passes through, is very light. But if you hold it, replay it, add meaning to it, imagine more, it becomes a story. And that story no longer belongs to the present moment. A small worry, if it appears and passes, has no weight. But if you carry it into tomorrow, into next week, into imagined scenarios that have not happened yet, it becomes a real burden. And slowly, you no longer know whether you are living with reality, or with what you have added on top of it in your mind. You are not living just one life. You are living with many possible versions of that life at the same time. There is a very gentle truth here, though not easy to accept. You do not suffer more from what happens, but from not knowing how to pause internally when it happens. You react immediately. You hear something. You react. Something happens. You react. A feeling arises. You react. There is almost no space in between. And that lack of space is what stretches everything out endlessly. Have you noticed? There are days with no major problems, yet you still feel tired? Not because of events, but because your mind has never truly become quiet. There is always a background stream of thought, always preparation, always a subtle tension that cannot be named. You call it responsibility, maturity, effort, but perhaps it is simply the habit of never allowing yourself to rest. Not external rest, but internal rest. Sometimes you think you are resting, but your mind is still running. Resting while still thinking, pausing while still worrying, sitting still while not truly still. And eventually you become so used to it that you no longer notice it as strange. There is something very important you often overlook. Between a thought and your reaction, there is always a very small gap. So small that if you are not slow enough, you will miss it. But if you can see it, you will understand. You are not forced to react immediately. You can pause, just for a moment, and in that pause, things no longer push you the way they used to. But to see that gap, you must allow yourself to slow down. And slowing down often feels uncomfortable, because you start hearing what you have been avoiding. Unnamed worries, unacknowledged fatigue, pressures you have normalized as just life. At first, it may not feel pleasant, but if you stay a little longer, you may realize something strange. Beneath all that tension, there is no single big problem, only a long accumulation of exhaustion. Not intense, not dramatic, but real. And once you see it, without needing to change anything, you naturally become a little lighter. Not because life has changed, but because you are no longer making it heavier than before. And perhaps that is when you begin to understand something very deep. Suffering does not always come from outside events, but from how you stay with what is happening inside you. There is something very quiet here, but if you truly stop and look, you will see it more clearly than anything else. You do not suffer because life itself is too heavy, but because of how you perceive and react to it from moment to moment. Suffering is not something far away. It does not come from the world. It comes from your holding. your resistance, your constant demand for things to be different immediately. There are times when you ask yourself, why have I tried so much and still do not feel light? But perhaps a deeper question is, how am I trying? Are you living, or constantly preparing to live better? Are you experiencing this moment, or trying to fix it in your mind? Are you here, or inside a version of yourself you think you should become? And perhaps the most important question is, have you ever truly stopped, without trying to change anything at all? Because only in those moments of non-interference do you begin to see clearly. Thoughts are just thoughts. Feelings are just feelings. They come and go, not to control you, but simply to be seen. But you rarely give them that space. You quickly push them away, quickly fix them, quickly solve them, quickly return to a state of being okay. And that urgency is what prevents you from ever truly understanding where suffering comes from. Maybe you have never noticed, but much of suffering does not lie in events themselves, but in your immediate reaction to them. Not what happens weighs you down most, but what you continue to hold in your mind after it has passed. Not other people exhaust you, but the stories you keep repeating about them in your head. Not the future itself is frightening, but how you keep living inside it before it arrives. And when you look a little deeper, you see something simple. You are not only living in the present, but also in layers of past and future stacked together. There is a very simple truth here. You cannot change your entire life instantly, but you can change how you are with each moment. Just less reaction, just a pause, just not fully believing the first thought, just not holding every emotion as absolute truth. And these small things are where lightness begins. Not an artificial lightness, but a lightness that comes from no longer making things heavier than they are. You may realize that what exhausts you is not life itself, but the habit of constantly resisting life in every moment. And when you see this, without forcing change, you naturally begin to let go. Not through intellect, but through understanding. A very quiet understanding. Not loud, but enough to make you pause. And when you pause, you realize something very simple. You do not always need to do something in order to end suffering. Sometimes, you only need to stop adding more. No more thoughts, no more resistance, no more stories. Just that, and in that simplicity, life begins to feel more breathable. Not because it changes, but because you are no longer tightening it as before. And perhaps this is what you need to remember most. Suffering is not in life itself, but in how you are living with life. And when that way changes, you do not need to go anywhere. You are already beginning to return. And when you return to yourself, you no longer need to search for peace elsewhere, because you realize it has never left you. You were just too busy to notice it. And in that very quiet moment, everything is no longer a struggle. It becomes recognition. Very simple, very real, very peaceful. And then, you do not need to become someone else to suffer less. You only need to see yourself more clearly in each moment you are living. Perhaps, that is already enough. If you have stayed until here, maybe there is no need for too many words anymore. What matters is not how much you understand, but what you have begun to see within yourself. You do not need to do anything big right now. Just try once to pause during the day. No phone, no rush. Just sit quietly for a moment and observe how you are inside, without judgment, without correction, just seeing. And if you notice even something very small in that moment, let it stay. Do not push it away. Do not conclude anything. Just let it be there. You may also write down one honest line. How am I feeling right now? It does not need to be perfect, just real. And if you wish, you can share it in the comments. Perhaps your simple honesty will help someone else pause and look deeper into themselves. If these words are meaningful to you, you may gently share them with someone who needs a pause, not to change them, but to remind them they are not alone in this journey. And if you wish to return to reflections like this, you may subscribe to the channel, not for more information, but so that each time you come back, you remember to pause, to breathe, to look inward again. You can also help spread these reflections in a very gentle way. Even a small share, a small reminder, is enough to help the Dharma of the Tathagata spread, and the lamp of the true teaching continue to shine. And finally, what matters most is not in these words, but in this very moment you are living right now. Just by returning, everything has already begun to change. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.